You're sitting at your desk, eyes darting between tabs. There's a restlessness in your brain, a hunger. You don't know what you're looking for, but you can tell something's missing. The days are starting to blur together again. The things you should be doing feel like they belong to someone else's to-do list. You're waiting for something to spark. And then it happens. A post, a video, a conversation, a stray thought while brushing your teeth. Suddenly, something clicks. You think, this could be it. And just like that, you're off. For neurodivergent folks, autistics, ADHDers, this cycle is familiar. It's the slow hum of boredom, the jolt of discovery, the deep dive, the all-consuming phase of becoming, followed by a flattening, detachment, retreat, and eventually the pull towards something new. For many of us, it's the only way we know how to feel alive. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what I call the neurodivergent passion cycle, a pattern I've seen not just in my clients, but in myself and in the community over and over again. We'll explore the 7 phases of this cycle, and we'll talk about how to move through this rhythm with less guilt, more self-trust, and the kind of language that makes your experience feel valid rather than something to hide or fix. Let's begin. Before the obsession, before the all-nighters and the Amazon packages, before the notebooks and vision boards, there's the void. This is the phase that feels like mental gravity. Nothing sticks. You try to start something, anything, but everything slides off. You sit with your phone in your hand, flicking between apps, forgetting what you're looking for. You open a tab and immediately forget why. You might try to get up and do something productive, but nothing happens. Sometimes it looks like burnout. Sometimes it's the hangover after a hyperfixation ends. Sometimes it shows up without warning, just an ambient sense of disconnection and irritability that's hard to name. This is a kind of emotional flatline, like your inner world is on airplane mode. And the worst part is that it's paired with a desire to feel something, to latch onto something, to care again. For ADHDers, this can be especially jarring. The internal motor slows to a crawl. You know you should be doing something, anything, but there's no fuel. Even things you normally love feel distant. Nothing sparks joy. For autistics, especially those with a strong need for structure and meaning, the loss of a guiding interest can feel like your scaffolding has collapsed. The days lose their shape. You may go through the motions of your routines, but without the internal thread that connects them, and everything feels disjointed. This is often where people start panicking. They think, what's wrong with me? Am I depressed? Or worse, they start digging up every failed project, every unfinished plan, and every time someone accused them of being flaky or inconsistent. It's a breeding ground for self-doubt. And it's made worse by the fact that this phase is usually invisible to others. From the outside, you're just being quiet, maybe a little off, maybe just tired. But inside, you're pacing. You're searching for something to attach to, a hook, an anchor, a reason to engage with the world again. It's important to understand that the void isn't the problem. It's the pause before ignition, the space where your brain is scanning for novelty, for depth, for something that resonates strongly enough to be worth your energy. But in a world that demands constant output and equates value with productivity, this phase can feel like a personal failure. It's a low tide moment. The dopamine is out to sea. And here's the paradox. The more you judge yourself in this phase, the longer it tends to last. Pressure doesn't create sparks. Curiosity does. So if you're here, if you're in the void, don't panic. This is not a dead end. This is the blank page between chapters. Sometimes it's a sudden flash, like stumbling across a video at 2 a.m. that makes your whole brain sit up straight. Other times it trickles in slowly. The spark is that moment when something cuts through the fog. A new idea, a hobby, a creative project, a topic you've never considered before, but suddenly can't stop thinking about. It grabs you in a way nothing else has for days, maybe weeks. And more than that, it feels good. It's a hit of possibility, energy, direction. Your nervous system starts humming again. There's movement. Not necessarily productivity, yet there's potential. That feeling of, wait, maybe this is something. It's the internal shift from gray to color, from stillness to momentum. And it can be incredibly powerful, especially if you've been sitting in the void for a while, questioning whether you'd ever feel that fire again. When the spark lands, you might start imagining scenarios where this new thing changes your life. A career path, a side hustle, a creative calling, the next big phase of who you are. And because neurodivergent brains often attach deeply, quickly, and sincerely, it doesn't feel hypothetical. It feels true. This could be it. You start collecting tabs, saving links, texting friends all about it, scribbling notes on your phone at red lights. You've got ideas now. You've got plans. You feel alive. For ADHDers, this is a pure dopamine rush, not in the shallow addictive sense, but in the deep connective way. You found something that matters. Your brain is lit up again. Everything now feels doable. For autistics, this might feel like stumbling into a future passion, or at least the early signs of one. This phase can be exhilarating, but it's often unstable. If you're interrupted, dismissed, or overwhelmed before you've had a chance to engage with a spark, it can disappear. That's why this phase often comes with urgency, the need to act now. Because if you wait too long, the window might close. So if you found yourself frantically starting a project at 1 a.m. or ordering 5 books on a topic you've never heard of 2 hours ago, this is probably why. You're chasing the spark before it dims. And when it stays lit long enough, something beautiful happens next. So the spark has taken root, and now your brain wants everything. Every article, video, thread, book, tool. You want to understand it from every angle, see how it works, where it came from, how it connects to everything else. And you want that knowledge now. You're becoming fluent, translating your entire world through this lens. It's like an anchor. It brings order, direction, relief. Time starts moving differently. You might forget to eat because you're so preoccupied engaging with this new interest. You might lose sleep, but you don't feel tired. The engine has finally turned over, and suddenly you're flying. Things that used to feel impossible, executive functioning, task initiation, even basic self-care, feel easier now because they're orbiting around something meaningful. This is the gift of hyperfocus, and also the part that can feel like falling in love. Maybe you start every morning by checking a forum, watching a tutorial, updating your setup. It becomes the scaffolding of your day. You might spend your free time building spreadsheets, mapping connections, mentally designing a future career. You might be practicing skills with an intensity that looks obsessive to some, but to you, it's just necessary. It feels like you're finally being yourself again, or maybe becoming someone you've always hoped you could be. For ADHDers, the deep dive can bring a kind of clarity you rarely get. The fog clears, the friction lifts. You can focus and you can sustain it. And that's addictive in the best way. It feels like your brain is finally cooperating. For autistics, there's peace in this kind of focus. But this phase also has shadows. You might find yourself canceling plans, ignoring messages, neglecting things you normally care about. There's a chance this new interest has taken up all the mental real estate, and it feels worth it. You might even begin to shift your identity around this thing. This is who I am now. And in that moment, you completely believe it. There's power in this phase. There's joy. Then things start to crystallize. You've moved beyond curiosity, beyond exploration, and into investment. You start reorganizing your life to accommodate it. You buy the tools, sign up for the class, you upgrade your gear, pick out the better software, order the niche books, maybe even start blocking out regular time in your calendar. You start saying things like, "This is really important to me," or even, "I think this is my thing now." And maybe it is. For many neurodivergent people, this phase can feel like a form of self-repair. You've spent so much time trying to find a thing, that elusive combination of meaning, stimulation, and sustainability. And now that you've found it, the instinct is to protect it, hold on, make it real. This often means committing with more than just time and money. It might mean telling friends, posting online, updating your identity just a little bit, subtly at first, and then more boldly. I'm a runner now. I'm starting a business. I've found my path. And it feels good. It feels hopeful. This phase often brings a sense of legitimacy. You're producing, you're participating, you're planning for the future. There's continuity, a routine. You might even start dreaming about how far this could go, what it could become if it sticks. But here's where pressure can sneak in. Because once you've declared this thing to yourself and to others, it's harder to let it stay flexible. You might start putting expectations on it. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it well. If I've spent money, I'd better follow through. If I told people, I can't back out now. You start setting benchmarks, even if no one asks you to. This thing is now a role, a responsibility, something that now feels slightly more fragile because you care so much about keeping it. This can be especially intense if you've had a history of feeling inconsistent. There may be a quiet internal voice whispering, "Don't ruin this. Don't drop this one. Don't do what you always do." And that voice, though understandable, can put pressure on the interest itself, one that makes it harder to stay connected to the initial joy. The commitment phase is powerful. It's where growth can happen. But it's also where performance anxiety begins to build, even if you don't notice it yet. For now, it still feels like you're moving forward, but soon the momentum changes. One day, the excitement is just a little harder to find. You sit down to engage with the thing, your project, your hobby, your learning, and instead of that familiar buzz of anticipation, there's a flicker of resistance. Maybe it feels slightly more like effort. Maybe you start skipping days without meaning to. Maybe your brain starts wandering halfway through. You tell yourself it's just a phase. I've just been tired. I'll get back into it. But the spark that once pulled you in so easily now requires effort to chase. This is the plateau. You've probably learned the basics by now. The novelty has thinned out. You've absorbed a lot, made progress, developed some skills, but the learning curve has flattened. And for a neurodivergent brain, that shift in stimulation can feel like losing oxygen. You might feel frustrated. Why isn't this lighting me up anymore? You might feel guilt. I've already spent so much time or money on this, I should follow through. Or you might start hearing that internal critic again, the one that's been waiting patiently for the high to fade. Here we go, another unfinished thing, classic you. For autistics, this phase might bring sensory or cognitive fatigue. If the project required social engagement or involved managing uncertainty, the early enthusiasm might have masked how draining it really was. Now that cost is catching up. It doesn't mean the interest is gone, it just means the internal structure holding it up needs reinforcing. For ADHDers, this is where dopamine starts to drop. The interest isn't new enough to give you that boost anymore, but it's also not quite complete, so your brain can't fully let go. You're in between, stuck. What often makes this phase harder is how invisible it is to others. From the outside, everything looks fine. You're still doing the thing, or at least talking about it. But internally, the scaffolding is loosening. You might not even want to admit it to yourself yet. This phase is where people often start trying to force themselves to re-engage. You might double down on structure, make a strict plan, try to brute force your way back into the feeling. And sometimes that works for a little while, but often it just delays the inevitable. Because deep down you can feel it. The thread is fraying. Then you stop. Maybe not all at once. Maybe you keep it on your to-do list for a while, circle back to it once or twice, try to fake the feeling, try to push through. But the tension grows, the resistance thickens. And then without warning or ceremony, you just don't go back. You look at the materials, the half-finished canvas, the unopened lesson, the expensive tools now collecting dust, and you feel a pang in your chest. Something that sounds like, why do you always do this? This is the drop. It's the moment when all the energy that once felt like forward motion turns in on itself. You avoid the activity and then start avoiding even thinking about it. You might feel a spike of guilt every time you see the gear, the tab, the abandoned planner. You might start shoving it all to the side, out of sight, out of mind. But of course, it's not really out of mind. It lingers in the background as a low-grade hum of failure. And this is often when the self-talk turns cruel. Why can't I finish anything? What's wrong with me? I get so excited and then I drop everything. I must be broken. What used to feel like identity now feels like evidence. Proof that you're unreliable, immature, scattered. This is where internalized ableism hits hardest. All the messages you've absorbed about consistency, discipline, sticking with things start surfacing. And instead of understanding this as a cycle, you see it as a pattern of personal defect. For ADHDers, this crash can be especially harsh. You finally found something that brought clarity, focus, hope. And now it's gone, and you're left questioning whether any of it was real. The momentum you counted on has vanished, and what remains is a kind of emotional whiplash. For autistics, especially those who've built structure, routine, or identity around this interest, the drop can feel destabilizing. The scaffolding collapses, your schedule loses shape. You might even question your sense of self. That's not dramatic, that's logical, because the way we connect to interests is how we orient ourselves. And sometimes people respond by doubling down on masking, pretending they never cared that much, brushing it off to avoid embarrassment, minimizing how deeply it mattered. The crash phase is lonely because we rarely talk about it as something expected, normal, even necessary. This wasn't you quitting. This wasn't you quitting. This was a shift in energy. And that shift doesn't mean the experience wasn't valuable. It just means something new is starting to stir. There's no big breakthrough, no dramatic recovery, just a subtle flicker of curiosity, a thought you can't quite shake, a video that lingers longer than it should, a conversation that opens a mental tab you weren't expecting. And then there it is, the quiet feeling of maybe. This is the shift. It happens beneath the surface, often while you're still mourning the last thing you left behind. Your conscious mind might still be tangled in guilt or confusion, but your brain, it's already scanning, searching for the next thing that feels worth reaching for. You may not recognize it at first. It might feel like restlessness or distraction, or the familiar ache of wanting something, even if you don't know what. But eventually, a new spark catches, and the whole rhythm begins again. It's driven by the same need for connection, novelty, meaning, the same hope that maybe this will be the one that lasts. And here's the paradox. It might, or it might not. But that's not the point. The shift isn't about finding the thing. It's about returning to motion, to possibility, to the natural pull of your brain doing what it's always done, reaching, wondering, weaving meaning from what it finds. This is where a lot of people try to interrupt the cycle. They might try to delay the shift out of fear. I'm not allowed to start something new until I finish what I've already failed. Or they might feel exhausted by the idea of beginning again. Why bother? I'll just drop it like the last one. But your brain will keep shifting whether you give it permission or not. It's what it does. It's how you're wired. And trying to suppress that cycle just leads to stagnation. The goal isn't to fix the cycle, it's to move with it. The shift is an invitation, a gentle tug back toward engagement. And if you can meet it with curiosity instead of judgment, it can become a doorway instead of a detour. You don't need to force it, or justify it, or promise it will be different this time. You just need to notice it and follow where it leads. One of the challenges with this cycle is that it can often be accompanied by a self-blame spiral. You miss a day or two working on your project, the motivation dips, you feel less drawn to it, and then instead of curiosity or compassion, what shows up is judgment. That voice, the one that says, typical, you never follow through. Why do you always lose interest once things get hard? It doesn't care that your interest was real. It doesn't care how much you've learned or created or how alive you felt when you started. It only cares that you stopped. And once that voice gets going, the spiral deepens. You start second-guessing your instincts. You hesitate before exploring something new. You start talking about yourself like you're unreliable, inconsistent, wasteful. You may even avoid starting things altogether, just to avoid disappointing yourself again. This is where masking kicks back in. You minimize your interests, you downplay your excitement, you stop letting people see what lights you up. You shrink the edges of your personality to look stable. And in doing so, you disconnect from the very pulse that keeps you engaged in life. For some, the spiral starts in the plateau. For others, it waits until the drop. But once it's in motion, it can cloud every other part of the cycle. It distorts your memory of the joy you felt. It makes you question whether any of it mattered. But that voice is conditioned, fed by years of being misunderstood, invalidated, or pathologized. It's the sound of internalized ableism echoing through your nervous system. But for neurodivergent people, this cycle is often how we grow, how we process, how we exist. We don't owe constancy to anyone. We don't owe follow-through just to make other people more comfortable. We owe ourselves curiosity, compassion, space to breathe. And when that voice starts up again, and it will, your job isn't to argue with it, it's to remember who taught it to talk like that in the first place. Then choose not to listen. The cycle doesn't need to be tamed. It does need to be recognized. Because once you can name it, when you can see the full arc, not just the moment you lost interest, you stop making it personal. You stop calling it failure. You stop dragging yourself through the shame when what's really happening is entirely predictable and natural. You start to notice, oh, I'm in the shift. Or, this is the plateau. This is where I start overcompensating. You begin to work with it. Adjust your expectations. Give yourself structure where it helps and freedom where it heals. And that changes everything. Because you're not broken. You're not scattered. You're not doomed to float from thing to thing without meaning. You're someone whose brain moves in pulses, like tides, like seasons, like breathing. There's wisdom in how your attention moves. There's meaning in what you care about, even if it's brief. There's nothing frivolous about excitement. There's nothing immature about wanting to feel alive. So the next time the spark fades and you feel yourself slipping into the drop, pause, take a breath, name where you are, then wait. Something new is coming, and you'll be ready when it does. If you want more videos like this, real talk, real tools, and zero shame for how your brain works, hit the like button and subscribe. I'm building this space for us, and there's so much more coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.